Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, April 17th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about the Democratic Party and their fundraising machine that has been churning out money and dough for the Democratic Party to do very, very well in this coming November Senate elections amidst what is expected to be an extremely important time period for the Republican Party as they put in ad buys, they start getting themselves established as their respective party nominees, and generally just get significantly more involved in this electoral process than ever before. Now, the Republican and Democratic campaigns really don't see ramping up, as I have mentioned, until about now. The general election season begins here, and many of the primaries that we've seen and just the decisions in many of the states in party conventions and who generally is going to win these party primaries here, we have a general idea of what our Senate matchups are going to look like in a couple of months as we get into the real general election season of both the presidential and also these congressional elections. Now, of course, fundraising is one of the most important factors, but interestingly enough, in a very different way from the presidential level, fundraising is often an indicator of electoral success in congressional elections. Open Secrets has done an analysis here over the past 20 years questioning, does money win, seeing the percent of races won by the top spending candidate in both the House and the United States Senate. And in the last election in 2022, when it came down to Senate elections, 82% of candidates who outraced their opponents ended up winning in their Senate elections. Then in the House, it gets significantly higher at 94%. And with all of these major headlines coming out talking about how Democrats are killing it when it comes down to the fundraising game, raising hundreds of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, depending on the race, the state, and the entity that is fundraising these numbers here, Democrats are significantly outpacing Republicans and putting in ad buys and ad reservations, ultimately completely clogging up a lot of the TV channels and the digital channels that Republicans were hoping to get a head start on that Democrats, in many cases, have already absorbed. Now, given that 94% of House elections have gone to the candidate that spends the most money and 82% of the candidates that spend the most money in the Senate elections typically end up winning, it definitely is a lot more accurate than many of the major pundits that we listen to, generally speaking. 82% is not far off from what we would expect to be a very strong and really reputable source. And yet, it just comes down to a very simple thing: money. And so looking at the fundraising data and the headlines like this one, it really feeds into this continuous narrative here that the Senate elections are not going as poorly for Democrats as they otherwise might be doing. And if you're wondering why I'm phrasing it that way, well, it's for good reason. This is the current state of our 2024 Senate map here. 43 Democratic seats, 50 Republican seats. And the reason I give them 50 is because West Virginia, currently held by Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, is automatically going to flip. There's not going to be a competitive race there. Democrats have no shot. In Florida, Rick Scott easily going to win that Senate election. They are very similar to Marco Rubio from 2022. We are going to see a large victory for Rick Scott. And then when it comes down to the state of Texas, although Colin Allred might be a stronger candidate than Democrats likely could have put up without him, at the end of the day, this state is going to go red, and Ted Cruz, more likely than not, is going to win it, and it probably won't be a primary target for Democrats in this election cycle. But it is these 7 states, all of which have Democratic incumbents, that are going to be the most important. Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, you might recognize because they are swing states equally on the presidential level. Versus Montana and Ohio, which lean more to the right, Ohio less than Montana, but ultimately are both going to go to Donald Trump, assuming the election was held today. And so Democrats are defending territory in Trump states and in competitive states, making this all around a very strong chance that Republicans do end up winning Senate control because they are already at 50. But it isn't a guarantee. And the fact that it isn't a guarantee on its own is embarrassing and certainly disappointing, at the very least, for the Republican Party. This Senate map is one of the most lopsided ones we have seen in a long time, in 6 years, because in 2018, Republicans were only able to gain Senate seats because it was running 2 years after Donald Trump had won his elections in states like Indiana and Missouri and in Tennessee and in North Dakota and in Mississippi, where they either defeated Democratic incumbents who did a lot better than Democrats typically do. For instance, Tennessee was around 10 points. Mississippi was 6 points or less. North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri all had Democratic incumbents. And so it was a different time. So did Florida, right? Different time, different election season. And yet Democrats lost seats in the U.S. Senate. And the reason for that was because this map is so exceptionally perfect for Republicans, it is actually quite embarrassing if they cannot get this correct and cannot win back Senate control. Because we all remember what happened in 2022. Republicans were supposed to win Senate control. Even the betting odds here, which typically, not typically, but sometimes do lean to the left here, said that Republicans were going to win the Senate elections. And that's because a lot of the data suggested that it would. A lot of what we understood about the election said that it would. And it was ultimately all on the Republicans for being unable to make it happen, because it very much should have, given where Biden's approval rating was, given where Republicans were on the generic ballot, given the performance of previous elections. Republicans had the means to win these Senate races and yet ultimately did not. And so why is this relevant? Well, it matters for this cycle, because for all of these states, Democrats are out fundraising their Republican counterparts. In Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, we can see it here in the first quarter alone. We've seen Democrats raise $12 million in Ohio, $10 million in Texas, $8 million in Montana, $8 million in Arizona, $6 million in Pennsylvania, $5 million in Wisconsin, $5 million in Nevada. And to look back at the 2022 cycle, I've shown you the 82%, but to take a look at it visually speaking, look at this map and then take a look at some of these numbers. But because for some of the incumbents here, for instance, in a state like New Hampshire, you see that Maggie Hassan out fundraised Don Bolduc 10-1. 41 million versus 4.1 million. In Arizona, Mark Kelly spent and raised $89 million. His Republican counterpart, Blake Masters, raised $14 million. In the state of Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto, $62 million to Adam Laxalt's $18 million. Raphael Warnock, $181 million to Herschel Walker's $68 million. Michael Bennett, $23 million to Joe Odea's $10 million. When you take a look at the open Senate seats, in Pennsylvania, John Fetterman running against a celebrity, a rich one, whatever you want to say, rich, wealthy, whatever term you want to use, John Fetterman out fundraised and outspent him. $74 million, $49 million for Dr. Oz here. And so you see that in many cases, money talks. It isn't perfect, though. Right down on this list, we see North Carolina, where Sherry Beasley outspent her opponent 2-1 and lost. In Ohio, Tim Ryan outspent J.D. Vance nearly 5-1 and lost. And so in some cases, in red states like North Carolina, like Ohio, it made a difference it didn't make a difference because of the partisanship in that state. But in some of these battleground states, especially ones like Pennsylvania or New Hampshire or Arizona or Nevada or Georgia, money talks and money wins. Why does that matter? Let's take a look at this map. What are the states we just said? Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, not up for re-election, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia also not up for election. In Ohio, Republicans still won. But it means here, because Sherrod Brown is an incumbent, that the circumstances are different. Which is interesting, too, when you take a look at some of these states. For instance, in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson was also outspent. He won his election, but it was marginal because it was $6 million and less than 1% on the actual ballot. And Florida and Iowa were going to be pipe dreams for Democrats. They were never going to win them anyways. No one ever really entertained that thought, except, the money that was raised there was honestly quite atrocious when you take a look at where money could have been spent in some of these races here. But I'm not here to provide consultation to any political party. What I'm here is to analyze the role of money on these elections and taking a look at where Democrats are when it comes down to polling data. Arizona, Ruben Gallego up by 6. In Michigan, Elisa Slotkin up by 1. In Montana, John Tester up by 6. In Nevada, Jackie Rosen up by 4. In Ohio, Sherrod Brown up by 6 or 5. In Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin up by 4. The leads here, Democrats need to maintain. They need to maintain them because the leads here indicate the Democrats are on track for victory. But how do they maintain them? With money. Money absolutely talks. And these fundraising numbers, interestingly enough too, in the first quarter are often early indicators of who's going to be raising more money in totality in an election cycle. And so in this case, Democrats start out in the upper hand, out fundraising in nearly every single battleground state. And Republicans look at this and say, we can build it back up. And while in a way they're right, looking at how much money they raised, or rather did not raise in 2022 compared to their performance, Democrats do need to spend, honestly, about 2, 3, 4 times the amount that Republicans do just to get that, victory. Democrats consistently out fundraise Republicans, but it does often make a difference. And in this past election cycle, like 2022, it did make a difference, taking a look at how close some of these races were. And so when I look at this, I understand, I'm working under this assumption here, that Democrats are going to be doing a very similar strategy to 2022, where they're going to be raising money. They're going to be advertising. They're going to be doing everything they can to sway the public on their side. And Republicans may not be able to have a counter. Not because they don't have the talking points and not because they don't have the sentiment that they could rile and, build up within the base, within the average voter. It's the simple fact that they don't have the means to do this. Republicans have struggled with money for a while now. With the large Trump takeover of the RNC and the failed fundraising efforts of 2021, 2022, and 2023, the Republican Party comes into this election cycle with significantly less money. And we know that matters. It does make a difference, and in some cases, makes all the difference. In a state like Nevada, where Catherine Cortez Masto won her election against Adam Laxalt by 0.8%, and yet out-fundraised him $62 million to $18 million. That's the money spent. Think about how much that made a difference. If Cortez Masto is winning by 0.8 and yet spending $40 more million, roughly speaking, that matters. I look at that and say, this is not good for the Democratic Party in theory. But if they can maintain this level of difference in fundraising amounts, in fundraising ratios, this could be the winning strategy again for Democrats in 2024. And guess what? When you take a look at the money that they're fundraising in the state of Nevada, right now Jackie Rosen is out fundraising Sam Brown by roughly 2-1. An improvement does, in theory, need to be made. But based on where we are, Democrats are up in Nevada. And it'll be a very fascinating election. It'll be a very telling sign, too, about the extent of money in these congressional elections. Because Democrats have out fundraised in Montana, they've out fundraised in Wisconsin, Michigan, even Ohio. Which means if Joe Biden won the election and states were to vote the way that the candidate fundraising numbers have worked, Democrats would be able to maintain control of the U.S. Senate. It would be a phenomenal accomplishment for the Democratic Party because it means that yet again, against all odds, Republicans lost themselves a number of close and competitive states, and this made the difference in the Congress of 2018, in 2020, 2022, and could again in 2024. So I would take take a close look at what this fundraising number really reveals about some of these states, what it means about money in politics, just general sentiment. I think what we have found is Democrats have been fundraising and dominating the fundraising scale. But a tough year absolutely still looms. This is still a very crucial, important, and competitive election. And anything can happen between now and November. And so as Democrats look ahead to the fall, and they look ahead about what they can be doing now, keeping up the fundraising metrics, keeping up where they are in terms of donor patterns and donations, whatever it is, money talks. And we know with an 83% success rate, at least in the last cycle, and over time, quite frankly, pretty average for that. Back in 2018, it was 82.86%. 2020, it was lower, a huge influx of money there, but it's interesting to see 2024. It's not a COVID year. It's not a year that is, completely boiled up over a pandemic and, exclusively mail-at-home voting for many people. This is a normal, regular presidential election. And so money matters a lot. Money mattered a lot in 2022. Quite frankly, it mattered a lot in 2020 and 2018. This cycle is going to be quite interesting. And I think looking at our expectations for how much money is to be spent, I think Forbes estimated over $10 billion on this election alone across the country. Presidential, Senate, gubernatorial, totaling up to $10 billion is a crazy amount for just one cycle. For some cases, 2 years, some cases, 4 years, and some weird elections on local stances in between those. Regardless, though, this election is going to matter, and so is the money in this race. And so as we track the money that comes in quarter after quarter, if Democrats can keep this up, if Democrats, quite frankly, can maintain this between now and October, I do not see a pathway that they lose any more Senate seats than just the state of West Virginia. While if Donald Trump becomes president, that may not matter. Republicans still win the Senate majority. It does matter if Joe Biden wins re-election, and would bring them a lot further back to where they were under Kamala Harris, but would be a necessary component for Democrats to pass any legislation in the event of a Biden second term. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, this video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.